So this is an example of the new rule, and it's going to be this player right here. So we've got this box, and it's the tight end box, and it's going to go the normal tight end position. So 2 yards outside the tackle, laterally on either side, and then 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So you can block low legally within that box, provided you don't violate another rule like chop block or clip. But once you go outside the box, then both offense and defense are prohibited from blocking below the waist. It's going to be the defensive back here who is going to attempt to get low, and taking on that block, he has to stay up. He can't go low through that blocker. Even to get to the runner, you've got to stay up. So that's a 15-yard penalty.
What do you think of the rule in a play like this? Do you think this is the right outcome for the game?
From what I know, I don't know if there was compelling injury data in terms of these blocks out in space that are causing, there was a 33% uptick in ACLs. I don't know if a lot of those were these types of blocks. I don't think that's the case.
I am a licensed clinical psychologist by trade and training, but I've been a sports psychologist for the last 20 years. This is something that I would kind of put out there for really not just quarterbacks, but for all players in the NFL. I think there's 3 kind of buckets. One is the competitive bucket, which most people tie to performance. So it's like pre-game stuff, during game stuff, that kind of deal. Then there's more organizational bucket, which is kind of like what goes around that game time stressor. And one thing that I do think is notable for quarterbacks or exceptional to quarterbacks is the leadership responsibility. There's 2 people or 3 people really that can walk into a room in the football facility, and it changes the whole vibe of the room. It's the quarterback, the head coach, and then the GM. And then the final bucket is the personal stuff. So I think when we're talking about kind of like managing success from a psychological lens, it's one, mitigating these types of stressors, but it's also about kind of optimizing. I wanted to start with the basic premise and highlight to you all that human behavior is complicated. And I don't want to undersell that point. What I'd like to do is give you all some concepts, sort of like the intent of a law versus the letter of the law. So that way, when you're navigating this with a quarterback room or a player, that you've got some concepts to kind of go with, and that will help maybe lead to your behavior and help lead to a better optimal environment. So the first rule that I always like to talk about is all behavior has meaning. All behavior has meaning. So sometimes I point out the shoes you're wearing, they might be your lucky shoes. They might just be the shoes that were closest to you as you were on your way out the door, or they might be purposeful, like they might be cleats or business shoes. So then you know what's going on. And so all behavior has meaning both for the quarterback and also for you, which means what you do often conveys a message to the player as well. So something that I've been dialoguing a lot with the teams I've been working with lately and getting great utility is about the idea of passion and purpose. Passion is more of a selfish endeavor, like what I'm passionate about. And then purpose is more about something that's greater than yourself. One of the ways that I do this with teams is I'll draw a big circle and I'll say, I want you to list what you want to accomplish. Then it's a smaller circle that says, okay, how are you going to accomplish it? And then an inner circle underneath there, which is why you want to accomplish it. So this is your goal. This is your process. But this is the driver. But once you unlock this driver, you can get a player or anyone to do just about anything because you know how to motivate them. You know how to inspire them. Like, you have to unlock this in order to know how people tick. Now, speaking of human interaction, if human behavior is complicated, human interaction is a multiplier of complexity. And the reason I say that is you've got the complexity of your behavior, the complexity of their behavior, and then the interaction of those 2 things. And that also becomes 360. So for example, working with a head coach who had an offensive coordinator who wasn't on the same page, and both of them were chirping in the ear of the quarterback, that's a whole level of dysfunction that is really hard to untangle. So when I think about coaching player relationships, Something that I think you'll hear a lot of talk about is psychological safety, which has a great level of research behind it, but it's now turned into a pop psychology term, like, oh, we need psychological safety. And it's almost become like a woke cancel culture type term. So I want to bring it back to the science. And the science is psychological safety is really built off of trust. And trust is built off of these three things. Authenticity, meaning like how authentic, how true to yourself are you? How transparent are you? Logic kind of stems from the Greek philosophy. It's really about like, do you have the answers to the test? And then the final one is empathy, being able to really try to appreciate where someone's coming from. I have found one of the best ways to help people guide and understand these three entities of trust is to think about a leader or a boss or a coach that you really struggled to follow and ask yourself, which one of these three things was missing? And I have found when I do that task, people will immediately go with, oh yeah, that guy was a lying snake, authenticity. Oh man, that guy didn't know from his elbow, like he couldn't talk football if his life depended on it. That's the logic. Or, that guy just didn't give a about me. And there's the empathy. So I think that's another kind of fun exercise that you can do on your own if you want is, just take a moment and go, okay, who's a boss, an owner, a GM, a head coach, who's somebody that I really struggle to follow or believe in? It could even be politics if you want. And then just ask yourself, which one of these three buckets, and it could be all three, but which one of these three buckets was that individual really struggling with or missing? One thing that I would talk as a concrete game plan for you to all execute is be cautious of overt statements. I think in sports, we do this too much. Like, I love you like a brother. I trust you. You can trust me. Like, there are all these times where we say things like, oh, this is a family and I care about you and all of this kind of stuff that if that stuff truly exists, you don't have to say it. I'm kind of cautious of overt statements. I think, 90 to 95% of communication is nonverbal. If you genuinely, authentically care for that quarterback, they're going to know it.
Take someone like Trey Lance, where our whole society now is like an instant evaluation. So if Trey Lance doesn't start, right, and you're coaching him, and yet Wilson and Lawrence and now Mac Jones is starting, like, how do you manage that situation where he's not even on the field? And I got to think he's probably feeling anxious about that. Is your approach a little bit different with someone who isn't playing right away?
Well, I think that you've got to make time for him. You've got a 7-on-7 script. You got a team script. You got to make sure he gets all the reps after practice with the developmental guys. You spend time talking with him, working with him, and continue to grow your relationship and treating him, as if he's a starter when the time you are with him. But I think there's a caveat to all this, and that's with rookies or new quarterbacks. The relationship, because it is bilateral, depends on the competency of the coach and the coach in the meeting rooms. And quarterbacks are really smart. They know quickly whether their their coaches in the room are competent, whether they're together, whether they're all on the same page with the system, with all the other coaches in the room, because the room doesn't survive and the team doesn't survive without that kind of competency and consistency. And that competency builds trust. Players expect the coaches that a complex game, slow it down. They're able to communicate with the player to help them execute and to keep them safe, not only in the locker room but on the field as well through protection, and give them immediate answers so they can fix a play before it has to be executed. Everyone in the room's really got to speak the same language. Lastly, there's expectations in the building and out of the building as well. And, every quarterback's presence is felt, when they walk into the building, particularly the first round picks. And, I always try to tell them to spend time in all departments, to let people know that they're important, to learn people's names, not outside of the work that they have to do in preparation to play the game, but there's enough time during the hours of the day for them to work the building, to show respect for everybody in the building, and let them know that they're just like everybody else trying to work hard and win football games. And, first-year quarterbacks are, these guys are going to be the face of the organization. They've evolved enough in their college careers to know they're the face of the organization, and everybody is watching what they're doing, but they're prepared for this big stage, and they understand the platform they're on.